Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back to the Collision Live. Daniel here, joined at the desk, as always, by the Bonnie to my Clyde, more hairy, bearded Bonnie. How you doing, Sam Camp?
Oh, I'm just fine. A little sore. We did some manual labor yesterday, so I'm not as young as I once was, as it happens.
Yeah, Sam gave me a text. Hey, you want to help me just move something real quick? Moving a big shed, move a big house. It was like 4 hours later. So if we seem a little
Whoops. Yeah.
creaky today, it's because we were doing that. But hey, yeah, a lot of stuff going on again this week.
Yeah.
If you guys are new to the show, every week we just kind of look at what's going on in pop culture, the trends, the kind of the news stories, and just sort of more bird's eye questions that as Christians, how should we engage with entertainment and video games and movies and TV shows, and just sort of break it down conversationally about, what does this mean? How do we do this? How do we do it kind of effectively, kind of as witnesses of Christ in today's culture that we've been sent? So
And the occasional book.
yeah. So again, a couple interesting things for us to talk about today. One is kind of maybe more like a general topic, than the other one more related to some pop culture news. I get into some of the Looney Tunes because we're Looney Tunes fans. But so again, the first thing that we can get into a bit actually is inspired by my kids. They came home. I have two 6-year-old twin boys. They're in kindergarten right now, and they came home sharing with me the other day some kind of exciting stuff that they've learned. They have Bible class. They go to a private Christian school, and some of the stuff about Satan and hell, and sort of the backstory of this. And as they're kind of sharing all that they learned, I'm thinking, hey, this sounds a lot like a different story. This sounds familiar. And the reason it sounded familiar is because it was much of it was kind of ripped straight from the pages of the great poem by John Milton, Paradise Lost, which kind of tells the story of Satan and his rebellion and his fall, and what a lot of, I think, Christians don't always realize is that a lot of these sort of this story that came from the poem sort of integrates and becomes accepted as sort of the biblical truth. You can't always tell the better to reign in hell than serve in heaven, sort of this quote we hear all the time, which is from the poem, not from the Bible. So it's got me thinking. I think sometimes there's a lot of, we don't always realize, obviously, like Christmas and stuff, there's always those like fun quizzes about like, do you really know the story? And I kind of realizing that a lot of it actually comes from like cultural stories and things rather than actually scripture itself. So I thought maybe we could just get into like, how do we, as Christians, we should, how do we deal with that? How do we kind of be aware of, making sure that our own kind of theology and our view of God is actually coming from the Bible and not just from kind of entertainment or artistic depictions or Christian books that deal with God doing things that maybe he wouldn't do in the Bible. Any kind of just general thoughts for?
Yeah, well, I think it's good. It's one of those things where it's like it's just good to be aware of, sort of like, several episodes ago we talked about, I think we talked about the social dilemma, and just the being aware of the impacts of social media, even on like your thinking and even what you see as being relevant or in the news. I think it's good to be aware of that, and in the same way, I think it's good to just maybe question some of your assumptions about theology, but also just more broadly, like the representations of, say, who God is, representations of Christ, the Christmas story, of Satan, and all these sort of things. And so I think just being aware, like, okay, so where does that come from? Like maybe just stop and ask yourself those questions from time to time, and just be careful to not let just sort of these assumptions guide your thinking on more, I think, serious topics.
Yeah, because I think sometimes we've been talking a couple of weeks in a row now about, do we need to sort of make this bubble, the safe Christian of, where we just have faith-based content, we keep out all the dangerous kind of secular movies and entertainment. And I think kind of another byproduct of that mentality is that when you sort of see it as like a them and us and they're bad, you sort of assume that anything that's sort of in your bubble is safe or acceptable, and well, it's faith-based, so don't need to kind of turn your brain off and kind of relax you
Right.
and navigate these dangerous worldviews. And I think sometimes we don't always question where things come from. I think even just like Christian music, if you figure,
Yeah.
if you kind of add up the average Christian, how many hours in a week they hear like a Christian message or like a sermon or even just reading their own Bible compared to just listening to Christian songs on the radio. A lot of these theological, obviously they're not all wrong.
No, but they're also not all right.
Yeah, but there is some bad theology that creeps into some of those songs. That are we being influenced? What's sort of the dangers of that? Like, how do we?
Yeah, well, and I think you see this a lot too. Just maybe within the church of how people throw around the idea of being blessed and that kind of stuff. Like I think. It's like, oh, well, I'm just so blessed, feeling so blessed. I bought my first house, or, I got this new car, or we tend to equate sort of the blessings of God with material possessions a lot of times. And it's like, where on earth does that come from? Like, because it's definitely not like how Jesus saw it, but I think we tend to think that when things are going well, it's because God's smiling down on our life and it's just really been great. And it's like, well, that may be nice that things are going well and you're financially stable and those are all, I'm not saying those are bad things to have, but it's like that doesn't like equate to like God's favor on your life. But yet I think these sort of things tend to just kind of weave their way in, and because they don't get questioned, especially if it's in the form of some Christian song that's generally encouraging and uplifting, then we tend to think, oh well, then it's fine, and we're not questioning sort of the motives behind it.
It's even like like a lot of these Christian kind of romance novels. And again, they get a bad rap for sort of they're all like some kind of girl modestly dressed in like some field of wheat, or like all those books. They all it's just almost a stereotype. But again, like, are we getting sort of God's design and how kind of for relationships and romance and all that from the Bible, or is that kind of from a lot of these Christian movies and the way that the artists are kind of projecting their own theology, which again is sometimes is very biblical and sometimes it's not. Like how does this again? Like, the whole kind of Satan and his rebellion and stuff, like in the Bible, you have to look pretty hard to find anything that kind of is alluding to that. And most of the stuff that we take for that is kind of taken out of context or, bad translation. It comes from that. Again, it may be true. But again, I think we just need to be careful with how we're allowing, what to shape our own.
Yeah. Well, and this reminds me too, just, we've done a video and you can find it on our YouTube channel, just talking about can Christians watch R-rated movies? And I think it also gets sort of to this point of like, well, if you're only relying on a simple rating system to say, well, this is worth, you can watch this and you can't watch that. Like there's some like pretty bad, like PG or PG-13 movies, at least bad in the sense of like, not something you'd want your kids to watch, but it's rated PG, and it's like, yeah, but that doesn't mean that like the theology that it's teaching or the worldview that it's teaching is something that you want to be instilling in your kids.
Yeah, you can present a very secular humanistic message without profanity or nudity.
Right.
I guess a G rating that's like, it's like Smallfoot, one of the first reviews we ever did at Collision, was super atheistic, and it's a G-rated movie, or maybe it's PG, I don't know, but it's in the package of a kid's. I think like you're saying, I think sometimes trying to navigate just on simple, well, it's G or it's faith-based or it's it's almost kind of a lazy way to not have to engage or think through or ask difficult questions. It is sort of it's like a simple rubric to measure by.
Yeah, and I think to give people credit, like I think people are busy and they don't want to have to think through their entertainment choices. They want to be able to say, oh, this place recommended it, so I know it's going to be fine for my, like they sort of outsource the thinking to some other party, whether that's a blog that you follow or some institution that you trust their opinions on something or whatever it is. People have busy lives, and especially if you've got multiple kids, like you don't have time to be like proofing, some movie before you let your kids watch it. And so you want to be able to, and I think it's a very natural thing to say, well, I just, I need a shortcut to this. And so, I'm not going to think too hard about it, but I think if we think a little bit about it, it'll go a long way.
Yeah, it's just sort of a general this awareness. Obviously, there's lots of stuff that my kids watch that I don't even know they watch. It's impossible today almost to be completely on top of it. Kind of maybe a final thing, then we'll move on to the next topic. But I think even just as like Christian creators and creative people, I think that's why I feel more comfortable with like a Tolkien. Obviously, I love Tolkien, but where he deals with very Christian stuff, but almost like in not an allegorical way, but like in a detached sort of reality. It's kind of secondary world. I get sometimes a little queasy with like making God like attributing actions to God that are fictional. Like a lot of Christian movies and stuff do that, where God's a character and God's answering prayers and doing this. And sometimes that scene is like a safer place, but in my view, I think that's a very dangerous place to wade into, where you're saying, hey, this is God is doing this. God would do this. Like you're kind of you're putting actions and words into God's, which might be consistent with what we see in Scripture, but again, especially as your creator, you need to be careful with sort of how much you're doing that, and that you're not kind of making God kind of act on your script rather than.
No, I think that's a really good point, and I think it's so much more can be learned and even taught, if that's your aim through your artwork, by sort of creating that fantasy world or something other that you can teach those principles from, without sort of trying to like become like a systematic theology for kids today or what have you.
Yeah, and speaking of artwork, and maybe animated artwork and cartoons and characters.
Oh, I see what you did there.
I know, I haven't had a good segue in a while. I'm a little rusty with that. But kind of the next thing I thought we could talk about is kind of more of a news story. And again, it sort of falls into the umbrella of it's cancel culture. And I don't want us to, we've been talking about that, in previous weeks. You guys can check that out if you want. So I don't necessarily want us to like have that discussion on it. I think there's a couple other interesting things around it. And, I don't know if you ever envisioned you'd be having a deep conversation about Pepe Le Pew.
I did not.
The romantic skunk, maybe too romantic. Again, it almost seemed inevitable. If you guys aren't familiar with Looney Tunes, he's the skunk. He's in love with this cat. He's always pursuing her. Sort of this gag that they keep doing, that the most romantic character in the show is the stinky skunk.
Yeah,
and he's been a classic character for a long time, but clearly not. He doesn't fit the 2021 Me Too mindset. He's if you go back and look at some of these old episodes, like it's like assault. Like he is chasing. No does not mean no to Pepe Le Pew. He's grabbing. He's kissing. He's it's doing all kinds of things that were we didn't think about back then. That now there's more of an awareness. So the question is, what do we do with this character that's clearly not doesn't fit the mold that we want to, and you can kind of see it, which is why I think this is sort of an interesting case. You can see our culture doing that like, in real time. There's the Space Jam, the new legacy, the new Space Jam coming out, which I'm excited for because I love the first Space Jam.
Yeah.
And they're sort of been wrestling with how do we deal with this character? Originally, if you can Google it, they filmed a scene, which I don't want to put it too strongly, but it sounds idiotic. Like they filmed a scene and they were going to use him as like a teaching / preaching moment of where he was going to, LeBron James is the star. He was going to get like a lecture from LeBron, and this cat was going to get a restraining order against him, and LeBron was going to have a sit down with this skunk about, you can't touch people without consent, and kind of lay it all out. And again, just, if as much over the head as you can get it in a kid's movie. I don't think my 6-year-olds are going to be understanding what a restraining order is. But again, they switched the directors. Ultimately, the new director came in, just cut that scene and cut Le Pew out of the movie entirely. And then kind of Warner Brothers and Looney Tunes has sort of said, hey, we're not going to be using this character going forward. So again, my question for us, and again, if you guys are watching, if you guys want to weigh in, or if you have an opinion, is sort of somewhat twofold. Like, one is sort of, is that the right way to do it? Like, can we not change sort of change him going forward? Like, unlike a book or something that's set in time, like this is like new stories. Like,
Yeah.
You kind of see our culture doesn't really know what to do with these characters. Like, it's almost easier to, hey, we're just not going to have this character out there anymore. Rather
Yeah,
than,
I was gonna, that's
hey,
sort
the
of
new Le Pew is just not going to be, he's romantic, but he's not going to be, inappropriately so. And again, the second question we can get into maybe after if we have time is this: what degree of kind of validity is there to the concern that that this would, his actions, there's a direct line, leading to influencing kids to grow up and become, these sexual monsters and assault. Like, do stories and cartoons really impact us that much? Is there a middle ground? But what do you think about this? I guess.
Yeah. Well,
I
mean, I think the first question, I think it's the studios are doing what's easy and fast.
Yeah.
It's like, well, we just want to have that character. Problem solved. And so I think, again, I have no idea the conversations that go on at these studios to sort of come to these conclusions, but rather than do the difficult work of maybe reshaping the character going forward or bringing about some sort of transformation in the character, they just say, well, just cut him out altogether, and then that's no longer a problem. And so I think it's just I don't know. I think a lot of institutions like these studios and whatnot, just they don't want to have controversy, so much so that they would just sort of begin erasing those things that are now controversial that they put out in the world way back when, and so it seems sort of like a disingenuous way to deal with something.
Yeah, there's definitely a PR spin to this. Like, that's, like we talked about with some other stories recently too. Like, for studios, like, obviously they're run by real people and they have real values and all that. But like, the studio itself is in it to make money, and you make more money. Well, maybe you make more money by having a controversy, but you want good publicity. You don't want like boycotts against your thing. So
you want things to have a long shelf life, way after they've been.
You don't want something an unessential thing that's just sort of causing drama. You don't want the press tour to just be about Pepe Le Pew. You want it to be about the new story, and so I think you're right. It's sort of easier just to, hey, you know what, just cut your losses, move on. It's not like you're cutting Bugs Bunny or something. Like, you can still make the. But I thought it was fascinating though, because it's almost like it's easier. Again, this applies, I think, beyond just cartoon animals, but like, it's easier to just sort of erase something than it is to show something better. Like, to, like, have him be a different kind of character that not necessarily do what they were gonna do, where you just make it like some pull up your pulpit and have LeBron James preach Me Too sermon. Like,
well, and I think it just goes to the broader concept of like a path forward, like for people or for characters that are no longer tasteful. What do you do with that as a whole? And we mentioned the Dr. Seuss thing last week a little bit, but even that, like, he had issues in some of his early works that are that the estate of Seuss is no longer publishing, rightly or wrongly. But what you lose in that is the evolution of a person and how they have changed over time. And so I think when you just, in right now, this is not okay, so let's just remove it from, existence. Well, so what happens when, 50 years from now, you're trying to put together something of somebody's filmography or just trying to understand the times, when you just leave these gaping holes. And it's not to say that they were good things that happened, that obviously that his behavior or whatever wasn't right, but I think just to sort of erase stuff because it's in the past it was no longer acceptable today, that seems like we're losing a lot there.
Yeah, and this is even like a weird, because unless they come out, which wouldn't entirely surprise me, but like, unless they come out saying that, hey, we're gonna erase him from even the old episodes, like by not using his character going forward, like what you end up with is only the stuff that, like only the episodes that were deemed problematic, but not like the chance to have like a Pepe Le Pew that is respectful but still romantic and like maybe writing poetry, like sort of like a jilted lover or something. Like you sort of like, I don't know, to me it shows like the idea of like second chances and stuff, even in
Oh yeah, there are no
shows.
second chances in today's
Yeah, and like
in
obviously
today's
with
world.
like a show you can make it whatever you want. We have the power to make him fit exactly into our modern context, and it's still like, nah, just get rid of it.
Yeah,
But
well, again, because that's easy, and it would be complicated and hard, and it require creativity to bring a character like that into the 21st century. And so, we'd rather just do the easy thing.
yeah, and I think again this applies even just for the church, as far as it's always easier to like point out wrong than to like show something better.
Yeah.
And as the church, we're guilty of that all the time. We want to, this is wrong. We boycott things, but we're not always as good at creating stuff that actually shows what we believe. And again, this is sort of an example. But I do want us to sort of touch on this, the fact that like, how much does this like? There is, and we've talked about this like off camera before, right? in some of our collision articles, and like there's a knee-jerk tendency to like, when something happens, we need to point the finger at some media thing.
Yeah.
Most of the time, we're giving way more power. Again, like the classic thing is like with whenever there's like some violent event or tragedy or shooting.
The video games are always on the chopping
video
block.
games, or it's action movies, and we want to try and draw some line like, well, this guy did this horrible thing, but he also owned a copy of Die Hard by Bruce Willis, like is therefore
Yeah.
And again, it just going by the number, there's so many other factors that it's just not a good thing. But how much does it? Because on the other hand, like I feel like we would both agree that like it does impact like what we watch.
Yeah. No,
impacts us. Like it's not neutral. Like
well, and I think even just going back to our like bad theology and sort of the first segment, it's like you can be affected, just over and over exposed to the same sort of bad line of thinking. I mean, I think there's no doubt that it has an effect. It's just a matter of what amount of effect does it have, and I certainly don't think there's necessarily causation. I don't think there's enough to, even just going to the idea of the violent video games spawned, violent real world actors to act out their violence. And I think the same here. It's just a matter of how much. Like, obviously there's some effect, to the degree of which it's hard to say. And I think, again, it goes back to our earlier conversation of do a bit of thinking if you're consuming media that, like, one is just fiction, and I think for kids, kids can tell, like, I guess maybe some kids drop anvils on each other.
If they had the strength.
If they had the strength to, like, figure out how to hoist it up. And but, like, especially boys, and this, like, they're violent as kids, but they, like, that doesn't mean that they're, like, growing up to be, like, serial killers or...
Yeah, like when my boys watch...
Like, sword play is a big part. Like, I often am ambushed when I see... your boys, like, they've got swords, and so we have to be on the defensive all the time. But it's like they know the difference between, like, playing and acting, I think, and like actual, like, because
to me it's
I want to go kill my brother. Like,
kids
kids are smart enough to know
often,
the difference.
Obviously those acts, there's like decades that often separate it, and we still want to draw a line between it. But like I know, like me and my wife had our kids stop watching Power Rangers for a while because every time they did it, they just want to like punch things and each other and us, and like it's like, hey, this is charging you up too much. Let's watch other shows. Then as they got older, we kind of let them watch it again, and I think it kind of comes down to like entertainment obviously has power, it has influence, but we should be hesitant and careful not to just give it all the power. Where like you were saying, like with video games, like the irony of that is that you can look at the statistics that as video games among youth have gone up, most of which, or a lot of which, are quite violent, and I think you could say immoral, but like youth violence has actually gone down. Like,
Yeah.
and maybe it's because they're all inside playing video games. I don't know. But some of these sort of narratives that I get, it definitely changes us, almost against our will. I think there's nothing really that backs that up.
Yeah.
Beyond sort
No,
of
the
this
data's
classic
certainly not
narrative.
there.
Like does someone when he's a 30-year-old guy that doesn't know boundaries with women, like, is that because he caught a few Pepe Le Pew episodes back 25 years ago, or is there a lot more to it? Like, obviously, Pepe Le Pew is not the only one with that message, but I don't know. I think in some ways it almost like takes some of the responsibility off of us as a society or as parents, or like it's like, well, it's the movies, it's the entertainment. They need to change, rather than like if your kid's learning how to treat a woman when they're older by watching Looney Tunes as a kid, like. There's a disconnect.
There's deeper problems.
Yeah, there's deeper. And again, we tend to pick and choose too. Like you were saying, the Anvil. Like there's lots of stuff in these shows that we don't necessarily assume that our kid's gonna watch and want to go do. But whenever something happens, we kind of read back into it. Like.
Yeah. We pick and choose, and I think too, like, I was saying before we started, like, there's sort of this idea that we need to have like a nanny media, nanny state, even like. We have to make things that are like safe for the lowest common denominator, like, so that like the idea that people don't have agency and don't have like critical thinking, and can't like reason through a movie, like it has to be so dumbed down that people can't understand nuance or like get that this is a cartoon, like. And so I think there's this drive, this desire to like make everything like super safe. And I think you see this even just in like safety standards and playgrounds and like everything else is all about safety. And I think it's Jonathan Haidt's book, The Coddling of the American Mind, I think, just talks about just kids and how, they're so protected and safe today, whereas like 30 years ago, like, you'd ride your bike down to the grocery store and, there were no cell phone. But as a parent, you're like, well, I would never let my child out of my sight in public. And so I don't know. Like, and I don't know what that is. I don't know. I don't really have an answer for that. But it just, I think you see it bleed into to entertainment as well. That like we have to make these sort of safe things.
Well, I think it's again. Then we can move on too. But like, I feel like. Again, acknowledge like it does. We should be careful with what's going on. We should, there's things that are wrong in media that we should have an issue with. But it's kind of like once you sort of fall into this like trap of having to kind of modernize everything, there's no end to it. Like you keep kind of the ball.
Well, and then you get into Orwell's. The only thing that's relevant is the present. There's no past, there's no future. It's just now, and like that's then you're in 1984, and it's like. You just keep erasing things because they don't meet the standard of now. Well, then eventually all you have is now. And it's like, well, you're just kind of like stuck in this really weird place.
Yeah, because I think you do need to kind of, when we first got Disney Plus, like we were showing the boys some of these old like Looney Tunes, and like, I don't want my kids to watch. Like those are
so violent.
They're like violent, and they're like psychedelic, they're bizarre. And obviously, I kind of would feel like we needed to modernize, and like, now, what was more modern for me is called into question, but so I don't think there's anything wrong with like changing as you go a bit.
Yeah,
it's just when it gets to be this like almost this like addiction, everything has to kind of point towards now. But again, I think our society is kind of wrestling with that in real time. But I think it's important as Christians to kind of keep our finger on that and just sort of see. I think as Christians we have something to contribute to that conversation. So this week at the Collision. A couple interesting things. One, the new website is coming maybe today. Maybe if you're watching this back later, maybe it'll already be up. So be checking for that, thecollision.org. Again, if you guys are like only watching us on YouTube or whatever, thanks for watching our channel. But we encourage you guys to also go over. We have a lot of other kind of material and articles and stuff that we do on our website. If you've never checked it out, check out thecollision.org. Excited for the new
Yeah, me too.
The new website is looking good. A lot more kind of resources and stuff than we've had before. So stay tuned for that. And we'll also have depending on when that gets launched, a couple new articles coming out. So stay tuned for those. Anything? Anything?
Well, I did see that a certain Duchess and ex-prince, I don't know if he's ex-prince or not, but had a nice sit-down chat with the Oprah Winfrey. So that's just kind of been all a lot of people are talking about the past couple of days. I think that aired last night or today. I haven't watched it. I've been seeing some hot takes on that, but yeah. So that we'll see what happens with that. I don't know. Like it seems odd. Like I guess my hot take would be just like when you're profiting off of bashing the family that you sort of separated from, like that. That's kind of a red flag, but
yeah, I guess it is very much like a public
spectacle
family. And again, I am a Canadian citizen, so technically the monarchy is also my monarchy. But again, I'm not super invested in what the royal family's doing. But
yeah,
but I would say we said this last week. We've been saying it, kind of beating this drum, just not to be too quick to like make hot takes. Like I think that's we live in a culture of hot takes. Obviously, a lot of the stuff that was shared, again, I've read the articles, the highlights, watched some of the clips, but I haven't watched the whole thing, probably won't watch the whole thing.
Yeah.
But again, a lot of the stuff that was shared was like, that is icky. I can see why they would be mad by that. But again, it's like one side of the story.
Yeah.
And again, even just the way it's presented, I think they ended it with like an announcement that they're having like a girl, and like they had this like a new photo, and like is this the nature of media is to very much everything has a purpose, and it's to present your story in the right way. So again, on the one hand, who really cares? It's not our family. But on the other hand, because I've seen hot takes on both sides.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
This is the truth, or they must be lying.
How dare they?
Yeah, like it's like just wait it out. Like if you are invested, and I think there is stuff we can learn from that too.
Yeah.
But again, I don't
know. It's just out there, and it just seems to. Yeah. Nor do I, but that's sort of what I've been observing.
Yeah. Any other thing that I don't think I have anything this week that.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Yeah. Well, a recommendation. One of my very few non-heavy metal recommendations that Blackmore's Night. I don't know if you're familiar with. They have, in my opinion, is the best Christmas album, Winter's Carols, that I make my family listen to. They're sort of like the guitarist from the band Deep Purple back in the day, and then his wife, who is a singer and does like kind of Renaissance stuff. And they're kind of like Renaissance soft rock music, but they're really good. It's one of the few metalhead stuff that keeps me, that kind of touches my softer side. But they have a new CD coming out this week, Friday, Nature's Light. So if you just need something to listen to while you work, or just to kind of get in that spirit of the Renaissance, check them out and then let me know why you didn't like them. But hey guys, thanks for checking us out. Thanks for joining us again. If you've been watching these videos, again, we didn't share this earlier, but we have some new kind of plans for this show too, as we're kind of relaunching our website. I'm going to be doing some fun stuff on this, kind of some new features and stuff. We've heard of this being kind of making this thing up as we go. So thanks for you guys for sticking with us. If you guys ever have any questions you guys want us to talk about in like a future episode, or something that happens that, some topic or controversy or just question about culture, let us know. We're always looking for, some might say we're scrambling for topics and things some of those weeks. So we'd love to maybe even just do an episode that's like on all question based thing. But again, guys, stay safe out there. Get outside if you can, enjoy the sun, and continue to collide with your world for Christ.